Welcome to the weekend warm-up on the Winners' Enclosure. It's always a little bit of a lull once we've had the exertions of Royal Ascot, but we have got a classic to look forward to this weekend. Of course, we've got the Irish Derby, which looks a pretty strong race, but we'll get into that in just a second, because back here we've got a good strong card at Newcastle, good racing from Newmarket, and also plenty of other stuff up and down the country. We'll start with Newcastle. It's their big day, and there's always quite an atmosphere. They get pretty dressed up for this day, don't they?
Yeah, I've only been to it a couple of times, but it is a big day.
I'm sure they were memorable.
Yes, yeah, they were. It was actually when it was turf racing at Newcastle, not all weather racing, but it's a fairly bleak place to go for most of the meetings. You get a lot of racing nowadays, obviously, with the all weather track at Newcastle. You get a lot of racing through the winter, and there's one man and his dog stood at the front of the stand, but on plate day it'll still be pretty busy as much as is possible in these COVID times. But yeah, I'm sure there'll be a bit of a buzz anyway at Newcastle on Saturday. And it is a really good card, isn't it? The quality of the meeting hasn't been detracted one bit for a switch to the all weather. In fact, I think if anything, Emma, it's probably a little bit better quality racing, and you know, more people willing to take their horses up there on the all weather track with a consistent surface that you get.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the four main races at Newcastle. We'll start off with the 145, the 6 furlong handicap. What do you like here? What takes your fancy?
It's a tough race, isn't it? It is a tough race. I'm going to take a chance on Clive Cox's colt, Streamline, who still hasn't had an awful lot of racing, and he's got a generally sort of progressive profile through his career. He was disappointing the last time that we saw him at Kempton, but he's quite a strong travelling horse, and he was just a little bit too keen. They left the hood off him that day. On all of his winning has come in a hood, which is refitted on the back of a break on Saturday at Newcastle. And that Wolverhampton win when he beat Summergand, subsequent group race winner, back in March, is a pretty eye-catching piece of form, and it shows us what he's capable of when he's on song Streamline. So I still feel like he's got a degree of untapped potential to some extent. He hasn't had a load of racing. As I say, he's got some eye-catching pieces of form. He has been sort of steadily improving over the last couple of years when he's made the track. And I quite like his draw as well in stall 10. Higher draws, I think, are favoured statistically on the straight course at Newcastle. So stall 10, and he's right next to one of the front runners as well, Mountain Brave, who's in stall 9. So it should just give him a nice sit and a nice toe into the race, really, Streamline. So he was my idea of the best bet in the race. I think I saw some double figure prices knocking around when the first prices have gone up. Whether that'll last, I don't know, but I thought that he still had potential, and it is a very competitive race though. What about you?
Yeah, the market reflects it's incredibly open. I think obviously Edge to Love comes right into it, so having got up close to win at the Epsom Derby meeting, ran really well at Chester the time before that, and you know, two strong bits of form, I think, certainly bring this one right into the mix. Woven's quite interesting. I thought on that run at York last time there was very little between the first four, and I thought that was quite an encouraging run, and he'd ran well before. But all in all, just Edge to Love, but no massive confidence. But it's just an interesting race to watch with some pretty smart sprinters. What about the 6 furlong chip? Go on.
I'd give a little bit of a positive for Woven as well, for what it's worth, Emma.
Yeah, well, that's good. We agree on something in the first race. Let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes for the other 7 or 8 races we're going to look at. What about the Chipchase Stakes? Because it's quite interesting, the dynamic of some of these horses that are clearly best on all weather surfaces back meeting here. Kuzam, I think, falls into that category. Rated the highest of these with a mark of 1:16, very impressive in the Mile Championship, dotting up that day by a mile, by 5 lengths, I should say, and then didn't cut the mustard at all when finishing last of 4 at Sandown. Seemingly is a better horse on the all weather, but what about the trip? He's never ran over 6 furlongs before. It's all been over a mile.
Yes, it has. I'm going to chance Kuzam as quite simply the best horse in the race. This horse is a little bit of a monster on the all weather, I think.
Yes,
it is a concern coming back in trip, but when I watch him back, I think he's got so much speed and a turn of foot that I think he will be over a stiff 6 on a straight track like Newcastle. If it was Lingfield over 6, I'd have more questions. But when you've got a bit more time to just get into your stride, I think you can get away with it a bit more on a track like Newcastle with a riding finish as well. And to be honest, when you watch him in his mile races, he barely ever comes off the bridle. Like, even when he's got beaten, he's sort of thrown it away a little bit in the closing stages, having got to the front on pretty much hard held. And he's just got a terrific record on the all-weather, hasn't he? And when he won that race around Lingfield, the all-weather mile that you mentioned, it was the first time that I've seen him really open up and put a race to bed with real authority. So I got the impression there at Lingfield that he was a horse that was really starting to mature into himself and fulfill his obvious ability and potential, if you like. And as I say, I've got a feeling that he will be effective on a track like Newcastle. I don't think the trip will cause him too many problems, and I struggle to watch him and think this is a horse that's going to be outpaced, to be honest, because he just does everything so easily when he's running over 7 in a mile. So yeah, Kuzan for me, but it is a hell of a race. Chill will have an each way chance as well, I'd say, but Kuzan would get the nod.
Yeah, then you've got Diligent Harry, who was a good winner of the 3-year-old championship race on that same card you're talking about at Lingfield, and again is lightly race progressive. Tabdeed I like. I mean, I'm guessing here. He's got a mark of 112. We haven't seen him since last September, but strictly on form, he was second to Glen Shiel at this meeting last year, which has worked out to be quite strong form. And then won the Hackwood Stakes. I think if he is in that form and he's as good as, or why not better, because he's a year older, then he would come right into the mix as well. But, you know, as I say, I'm slightly taking it on trust. Marcus's horses are running quite well. His strike rate's quite good at the moment. But yeah, the absence is obviously a slight concern. But yeah, fascinating race. What about the Northumberland Vase? This is certainly no easier. I'm going to start with Ziband, a horse of Roger Varian's, who had some decent form last year, was a good second in a decent handicap behind Prince Alex at York, third on his reappearance at Newmarket. Obviously, he hasn't tried the trip before, but I think he still looks like he's quite unexposed, capable of better, and slightly could be anything. I know they've always liked this horse.
Yeah, no, and the visor goes on Z-Band as well, doesn't it? Which could just have a positive impact. He maybe didn't quite meet expect. He ran okay on his comeback run, but it was his comeback. He was just a little bit laboured, maybe. When he came under pressure, he ran a little bit flat, and perhaps the visor, the feeling there is just that it'll livening him up a little bit. Based on his form last season, I think he's a horse that will stay the 2-mile trip, no problem. But I'm struggling to get away from East Asia in this. I've been so impressed with the horse since he came over and joined Ian Williams. He's won all 3 of his starts. He's powered through each of his races. He's won with real authority in each of those races. Now, they have all been on the grass, admittedly. And if you take the view that it's the turf that has improved him, then obviously you're going to have your doubts about him being effective at Newcastle on Saturday. But to be honest, I suspect it's just a change of regime and general improvement that has seen East Asia improve to the levels that he's got to. Because the Northumberland Plate was an early closing race, he actually just picks up a penalty for having won. So he gets to run off a mark of 80, despite having won at Goodwood on his most recent start off a mark of 82. So he's very well handicapped with that little penalty to carry. And I think it's an opportunity that they can take advantage of with East Asia. He's certainly, the way that he's been going, he's a horse that's thriving. And as we know, he is clearly ahead of his handicap mark that he's able to race off. So he stood out like a sore thumb for me, East Asia, to win the Vase.
Okay, talking of informed horses, you've got the likes of Raymond, who won a 2-mile handicap, so we know he stays at York last time by a nose. And Blow Your Horn, I thought, was quite interesting because he was quite impressive a couple of times, including here at Newcastle. Then went on to win at Chelmsford, and then went off 13-8 favourites at Chester last time. And I'm presuming he's a better horse on the all-weather. That seems to be what his form is suggesting, but I wouldn't rule him out back on his favoured surface. What about the plate itself? Great renewal, as it always is.
Oh, how good is it to see Trushan having a pop at a handicap off
I
118?
know, rated 118.
I know, Group 1 winner, taking a pop at the handicap off
10 stone 4, wasn't it?
118.
They've got a
Yeah,
£5 claimer.
you don't. Sorry, Group 2 winner, wasn't he? I say Group 1, but it is effectively like a Group 1 standard race, wasn't it? The long distance cup on Champions Day, but
Yeah.
Group 2 winner, Group 1 horse essentially, isn't he? And managing to take his shot at a handicap, you just don't see it very often. So it's great to see that, and Mildenberger as well, a proper group horse, taking his chance in a handicap as well. So that adds a real dimension to the race that you don't see in many handicaps these days. So that's excellent. I wouldn't be shocked if Trushan was up to defying it. They've got Reese Clutterbuck taking £5 off as well, haven't they, to just offset that weight burden to some extent. And we know that unfortunately he was cherry ripe for the Ascot Gold Cup last week, and they had to swerve that because of the deteriorating. The ground hadn't got soft enough. They didn't have the rain in time, did they? On Gold Cup Day last week, but. I was going to take a chance at one each way at a big price in this. All Right Sunshine for Keith Dalgleish, who he is a little bit quirky, this horse, but headgear has helped him. The visor was on at Hamilton last time out when he came from towards the back of the field, and he picked them off late on. He's only gone up a couple of pounds for that, and he is a horse with some really strong form if you go back through the book. I mean, he was only beaten 8 lengths in the E-Ball last year, finishing in mid-division. And prior to that, he'd actually run in the Sagaro over this course and distance on Plate Day last year, and he finished 5th in the Sagaro off level weights with the likes of Mildenberger, who he's getting £12 from on Saturday. So I think he's an in-form horse. He's a little bit quirky, but the track suits him, and if they go hard up front, he'll be picking rivals off late on, and I could see All Right Sunshine running into a place at a big price.
We'll switch to Newmarket now. They've got an interesting card, the 205, the listed filly stakes. Cachet, I suppose, is likely to be a very prominent horse in the betting, trained by George Bowie. She was a 5.5 length winner on her debut at Newmarket, hugely impressive. 5th of 15 in the Albany on heavy ground. So difficult to say whether she did or didn't go on it, but she certainly didn't disgrace herself on it. That's probably the best form in the book, isn't it, here?
Yeah, I think it is, to be fair. Having said that, a lot of the other fillies in this field haven't sort of had the chance to do that, have they? They've not been quite into the level that would allow them to achieve the sort of rating that Cachet would have done last week at Royal Ascot. I felt like she sort of got a little bit outpaced at Royal Ascot, and she looked as if she was ready for 7 furlongs at this stage. And
she's bred to get further, funny enough. I had a look at her pedigree, and I was going to say in time, she's certainly going to appreciate a step up into it.
Yes, she will, and she may get away with it, but I think she's taking on a pretty good field. There's some other fillies in here that have been impressive. And I was really taken by the way that Delmona picked up at Bath on her debut. Now, it was over the straight 5 furlongs at Bath. She was very green early on, but the second half of the race was really impressive how she picked them off and really powered through the last furlong, really. She was strong to the line, looked like through the race she was learning all of the time and getting better through the race. And like I said, that was over 5. The way that she came through late on and hit the line, you'd have to think that an extra furlong would benefit Delmona. And as I said, I think the experience will have really brought her forward. So I'd give her a pretty good chance at a likely good price as well, Delmona, for Tom Dascombe. The filly that she beat, Symphony Perfect, actually won back at Bath last night to give her form a bit of a boost as well. So Delmona, I'll put her up each way, but I do think she's got a pretty good win chance as well.
And Nadjit's another one I suppose we should mention. She was hugely impressive on her debut, her only start at Thirsk in a novice stakes. She won by 4.5 lengths. You've got to have plenty of natural speed to win at Thirsk, and I think she can only improve. I know they think she's quite good, and she's another one that would come into the mix there. What about at 240, the Fred Archer Stakes? We'll start with Logician, because he is a St Ledger winner after all. He's rated 116. What are your thoughts on him? Because it's been hit and miss since the Ledger, hasn't it?
It wouldn't surprise me either way if he came on a bundle for his comeback and he was back to the Logician a couple of years ago. It wouldn't shock me. You know, they've persevered for a reason. And I thought he travelled pretty well at Newbury on his comeback run. The vibes beforehand were that he would need it. He ran very much as if he needed it, didn't he? and he travelled like there was still an engine there anyway. Having said all of that, for a horse that's had the issues that he's had and has stood as little racing as he's had for the last 2 years, being asked to take a pretty skinny price about him, last I looked, he's around the even money mark. It just doesn't really make much appeal to me, to be honest. To be honest, the whole race doesn't make a whole lot of appeal for a bet. But I do think that Desert Encounter is the horse that at least is in form, and he's proven that he's still got all of his ability this season. He ran well in the Prince of Wales, didn't he? He was only beaten 4.5 lengths behind
He
Love.
did, yeah.
And this
But
is
the only thing I'd say, it was a slightly messy race, and nothing was beaten that far.
Yes.
But still, he can very much hold his own. He was second in the Gordon Stakes, a good run at Goodwood. He hasn't won since 2019, but yes, he's very talented. And if things fall his way, which they could easily in this, I can totally see the appeal.
Yeah, you sort of look and think, look, Logician may not run anywhere near his mark. He may not have that sort of ability anymore, and he's a short price. Max Vega's first time back, he's possibly more of a stayer. Pablo Escobar completely bombed out on his comeback run, and they fitted him with a visor. So there's negatives about pretty much everything. And Desert Encounter is a very solid horse at listed level who arrives in form. So he sort of by default was the selection in the race. But it's certainly nothing to be getting carried away with, I wouldn't have said.
No, I agree. I've tipped Logician because I do think that he'll come on an awful lot for his third of 5 in the Aston Park Stakes behind Al Arsi. We know that strong form. But and we know he's got an engine. But yes, he does have to improve. I think he will. And if he's back to anything like his best, he should probably win. But yeah, not an appealing price or bet at about even money. What about the 3:15, the Criterion Stakes? Kinross is likely to be favourite here, having won the John O'Gaunt Stakes at Haydock last month. Yes or no?
It's related to his price. It would be a no. I mean, he's right at the head of the market. I think I saw about 5-2 as a guide price for Kinross. And if that's the sort of price that he is, I can just watch him win, to be honest. No surprise if he does. He's very talented. And he had one of his good days at Haydock. The problem for me at the sort of price that he is that he's got too many blobs on his profile where he just doesn't turn up. We've always known since day one, he absolutely ran away with a Newmarket maiden first time out, didn't he? And he looked like a serious horse then. But ever since then, really, he's been hit and miss as to when he's produced that type of performance. Haydock last time, he did. But whether he will again, as I say, when you're being asked to take a relatively short price, it just wouldn't be for me. But it's the right sort of setup for him, that's for sure. And his Haydock performance was a good enough performance to go very close again in this if he reproduces it.
Totally agree.
Sorry, go on, Emma.
No, I was just going to say totally agree. When I saw the prices, I tried my very best to look elsewhere, but it's not totally obvious, is it? When you look at the opposition to find something to beat him. But go on. What do you fancy?
Yeah, that it's a fair point. Like he probably is the likeliest winner of the race. It's just that he's going to be priced up accordingly. And I quite like Lord of the Lodge at a bigger price for Carl Burke. He's just a really straightforward, banging form horse, to be honest with you. It's as simple as that. He clocked a really good time when he won the handicap on all-weather finals day at Lingfield. And he proved that he can mix it in better company than handicaps when he was second in the Group 3 at Leopardstown on his most recent start. He's very straightforward, just goes from the front, keeps galloping, really genuine. And I thought he was the only real front runner in this field as well. Now, he does have a habit of going off quite quick in front, but if there's nothing to actually take him on through the first half of the race, it can only be to his advantage, Lord of the Lodge. So maybe at a tactical advantage, do like horses that race on the speed on the July course as well, generally. And he's in really good form at the moment, so he'll do for me.
Well, I ended up looking elsewhere again with Tinker Toy and really taking a massive guess each way, because at the end of the day, he won a handicap of a mark of 91 at Newcastle. So he does need to improve a lot. But I was just trying to find something that is on the right way, on the right path going up. And I think he could be that. Like I said, technically he's got plenty to find, but I think he's quite an interesting runner. What about the Irish Derby? Because the betting suggests it's all about one horse, High Definition. He's always had a big reputation for Aidan O'Brien, who has farmed this race in recent years. But 11-8, I again, my first instinct was to look elsewhere, because at the end of the day, he was third in the Dante, and he was totally put in his place that day by Hurricane Lane for a start that was goodness knows how many lengths in front of him, and is 9-2.
Yeah, is he a stayer? Was he rusty? Or is he just a little bit slow and overrated? I guess we'll find all of that out on Saturday. The 1.5 miles will suit him. The track will suit him. I'm sure he'll step forward from York. But ultimately, he hasn't got the form in the book that warrants him being a clear market leader for an Irish Derby, does he? You know, he's got all the potential, and there'll be people out there that believe in him and want to stick with him. But you're not going to get rich back in that sort of horse that doesn't have the form in the book already at relatively skinny prices. He's got to go there and do it. And I must admit, I'm a believer in the Derby form itself from Epsom, and I think Mojo Star is very much the horse to beat here. And if he'd gone and trotted up in a novice and he wasn't still a maiden, I think he'd be a much shorter price than he is. You can look at a standout run like that and think, well, was he flattered? And of course, you ask yourself those questions when you're trying to analyse. But to me, he was anything but flattered in the Derby. I thought he came from he did come from a wider draw than any of the other principals. He came from further off the pace than any of the other principals, and readily picking them off on the home turn as well as he cut his way through the pack. It was quite impressive how he travelled and, you know, got on terms with the placed horses at the very least, for all that he wasn't a match for Adayar in the end. And all of that on his first try over 1.5 miles and his third career start. So I'm very positive about Mojo Star. I thought he was unlucky to bump into a good horse at Newbury on his comeback run this season, but for which he'd have been a wide margin novice winner, followed by a second in a Derby, and he wouldn't still be a maiden. So I'm not going to make anything of the fact that he hasn't won a race yet. They could have picked any race they like and won in the meantime as a racecourse gallop. But he goes there with the best form over 1.5 miles in the book, to my mind, and I think he's the horse to beat. Goodness
me, in that delivery of your view, you've sort of pretty much switched my opinion. No, I'm with you. I started by looking at this going, high definition, he may well win, but 11-8, you know, on what we've seen, just no way. But yes, Aidan O'Brien does normally win this race, and yes, he's probably better than what we've seen at York, and yes, the trip will suit him. There are positives, but to me, absolutely not at that price. So then I came back to Hurricane Lane going, well, he very much beat him at York, but actually he finished 3.25 lengths behind Mojo Star in the Derby. Different track, yes. I think the Derby form, like you, is the best form in the book here, and is the form we should be concentrating on. Then you've got Max Sweeney, who was back and forth, of course, the Irish Guineas winner. So to me, it centres around the English Derby.
Yeah, I think on Hurricane Lane, I absolutely buy that he didn't handle the track that well at Epsom, to be honest. And I think he has a chance. I do think he's got a chance of handling. The Curragh will suit him more. He just didn't look a natural. He was wandering around down the camber a little bit, and it probably didn't suit him. So I think the gap between him and Mojo Star on a different track will actually be closer. So I do respect him. Max Sweeney would need the rain, simple as that. He just looks a complete mudlark, soft ground horse to me. I don't think he'll produce his form away from those conditions. They are forecast some rain, aren't they? It just depends how much they get. The more they have, the better Max Sweeney's chance. But as I say, I think ultimately Mojo Star had them well beaten off, didn't he, and behind him at Epsom. So they've got a fair bit of ground to make up.
Well, let's see, because it will no doubt be Monday when we're reviewing the Irish Derby, so we can reflect on our thoughts just then. It'll probably be Martin, not you, so I won't get the chance to tackle you, or in fact, I could get a good opportunity to hide when you're probably right. But nevertheless, it's an intriguing race, and it's a really good weekend to look forward to. Are you going anywhere to be at the races?
I'm not racing this weekend, no. I'm going to be watching on from home and hopefully watching Mojo Star win the Irish Derby, because he'd be the nap of the weekend for me.
Goodness me, good stuff. Well, let's hope so, and we will chat to you again next week. Thank you.